Greetings, everyone. This short video is just an overview for peer review and for peer review for project 2. So part of the reason I gave some additional time for peer review this week is because I'm getting done with project 1 and looking at how people responded to peer review for project 1 and also the draft review memos. And I just want to give everyone some additional time to think about what this analysis task is asking you to do. So this is the draft that I said you may want to look at as an impromptu. Remember, I said it's something I wrote a while ago and it wasn't intended to be anything written for a class. And so we did a practice review of it in one of my classes, and we talked about it. So in another class, so 2 classes have talked about this document. So what I want to bring to your attention is in this 4-page document, after talking to about 40 people or getting a chance to look at this task, these are some comments. So when you first read this analysis, it does not look like the things you're doing for project 2. And when we look at chapters 4, 5, and 6 in Abrams. However, as I scroll through, one of the things we talked about is the issue with this analysis is the first part of it mainly is all about the author, like me, I wrote it. So it's all about my thoughts and stuff. And so what I'm telling this student, or based on what people told me, is the first part of this paper is just not analysis. So it's not analysis. We're telling the writer, you might want to rewrite it or delete this part. Do whatever it takes so that you are actually focusing on the movie that you're analyzing. So all of that should go, but that doesn't mean that there's no analysis happening in this paper. There is analysis. And when we get to about the bottom of page 2, we actually see some of that analysis come in. And so what we've done along the side here is point out to the places like, look, this looks like an analysis, because the writer tells us about what the movie presents itself to be about. And then the writer says, but there's something else going on. And so the comment over here that helpful, hopefully feedback, it says, hey, you do have some analysis. You're defining the movie, and then you're also suggesting it's about something else. And that actually works with something you said earlier about Kerry Washington's role in this movie. So if you can figure out how to bring those things together, you are actually doing analysis. And then we point out a couple other places. So here in this document, we point out that, look, this is actually summary, but it just needs some more analysis, meaning it needs more explanation, because you tell us that this character is complex. So you tell us that this character is complex and multidimensional, but you never use any evidence from the text to show that. So that's how we're going to use the summary, quoting and paraphrasing. If you make a claim about what's happening, you need to spend some time and develop it. So that's just another way of saying, hey, something is going on here. And then here, the writer says, hey, so here's my turning point. And so our comment to that is like, if this is your turning point, like now you're going to say something different. This is where we're going to get like a shift in hopefully better understanding your interpretation. Then the advice here is you need to spend some time before this turning point to tell us how Django has constructed a picture of that main character that the writer says is not really true. So if we're about to now get this true picture of her, you need to spend some time just explaining how his image of her is set up and what evidence can you take from the movie to show that. And this is something that someone pointed out as like, hey, here, I think this is your clear interpretation. So this is what you're saying. This movie is about a woman, and it is. So the main idea, the insight is spread throughout, and the writer needs to bring it all together. So I just wanted to just go through and show like some of these comments and the kinds of things you're looking for. So to give each other feedback on. So even a document that is clearly not written for the task at hand, it actually does use summary, interpretation, and it has a point that it wants to make, but it's just kind of all over the place. So this can be revised. So as you think about your own paper, and as you think about giving each other feedback, what I'm showing here on the screen too is just an example of, detail this conversation and not focusing on things like grammar and what you like or don't like. It's really just trying to, when you read someone's draft of analysis, have they given you an interpretive insight, and have they used enough evidence from the text to support their interpretation? And in this case, it's kind of there. It's mostly missing that summary and that interpretation for parts of the movie that the writer makes claims about, but hasn't yet shown. So please review a couple of things. One of the things I want you to think about and review is where the writer, the person who's writing the analysis, where they've placed themselves in the text. So in this example, this first part of the paper, I have put myself too much in the text. It's all about me, what I'm thinking about, and how I came to figure out my insight. I don't need all of this. So it's too much I focused, and that could be something that's left over from the first project people worked on. So what I want to show here is this first part of the paper, all of this thought about what am I getting out of and how I understand something about being silenced, trying to make all that connection. That is literally the process that we see in chapter 4 when they say that you need to know your interpretive position. And you need to think about your purpose, your background, your posture, your lens, and all of that. So these were points I have thought about, and it helped me decide what I want to talk about as the point of the essay. The problem is I wrote all of that in the actual paper. And that is another reason these first parts don't really work, because it's important for me to know about myself, but this part should not take over your text. The next thing I want you to think about is how the model texts are set up. And so I'm just scrolling through the text here online, and this section here is the assignment text wrestling analysis. I'm pointing this part out because it has 3 examples which are excellent to look at. So these 3 examples from this last section of the text, and then also the 3 examples from chapter 6. So what I did was look at the beginnings of each of these 6 examples to see how they've set up. So the other issue with my draft is it takes too long for the reader to know what I'm actually doing analysis of. And so what I highlighted here in this example, in each of the 6 examples from chapter 6 in the assignment section, in the very first paragraph what the text is, and you have some information about it. And that is the other thing that my draft is missing. But I do have insight. I do have an interpretation that I want to develop and get people to see how this movie is really about this character whose story isn't being told. And like the D in the title of the movie is being silenced. So I have that, but I just need to put it all together. And so the other thing that I did that might be helpful for you is I took those 6 essays, I looked at each of them, and I went through and I looked for the thesis statement, and I wanted to find the thesis statement so I can see what else is in that introductory paragraph. We get more than just the thesis statement. And so I pulled out each of the thesis statement and then am reminded that however it is you shape your thesis statement, whether you use this T3 strategy, the first essay and the third essay in the last section, they both use this T3 strategy. But the other 4 essays clearly tell you what the main point is and what they're talking about. So now I can go back and look at each of these essays. I'm like, okay, so here's the thesis. This is the thesis in this particular essay is actually 2 sentences, and a couple of the essays have 2 sentences for their thesis statement. So if this is what is going to be explained and analyzed, and the evidence from the text used to say how this interpretation is valid, what else is going on in the introduction? What is the writer doing to help set up the conversation for what their analysis is going to focus on? So look at the structure, pick a model text to model, to think about not just your writing, but as you prepare to give each other feedback. So the other thing in chapter 6 that is going to be helpful is the discussion on the thesis statement, because you're going to have a clear thesis statement. And so they give you some ideas for how you might structure it. So you get this T3 strategy, you get the occasion position strategy, and then you get this one called the research embedded thesis. And I just say all that because it's important to look at them, but the other major important thing is they tell us that those 3 kinds of strategies for creating thesis is not the only way you can create them. So those 3 strategies can be pulled and combined together to create unique, very focused and interesting thesis statements. And so my little document here is my way of seeing, outside of the T3 strategy, what have these other ones done in order to present their thesis statements. So yeah, and then I guess the last thing I want to remind you of is the way you are using paraphrase, summary, and quote. You're using that information as the evidence to support the development of your insight. And so this little section here in chapter 6 is very helpful because it reminds you that you are taking evidence, and you have to say something about it. You have to unpack it. You have to explain, elaborate, give some analysis of it. And that analysis should build an understanding for your overall point. Okay, so I think that's it. Again, the reason I am giving you a little more time for review is because I want you to use all the resources and yeah, give each other a little more critical feedback and yourself time to write. That my last point is you can't do any of this unless you know your source very well. So that's the end of that.